The quiet, longing Keanu Reeves had lived many lives in front of cameras. He was the hero in action films, the quiet man who spoke with his eyes, the actor who never seemed to age yet carried the weight of time in his heart. But when the lights went off, when the applause faded, he returned home to silence. People saw him as a symbol of strength, but deep inside, there was a longing he never shared. He wanted something simple. He wanted someone to come home to, someone who would stay, someone who would see beyond his fame. He wanted a wife, a partner, a soul who could fill the quiet spaces of his life. The world admired him, but admiration does not hold your hand at night. Thousands of fans smiled at him, but none of those smiles stayed when the doors closed. He felt it most on lonely birthdays when he sat with a small cake, a candle burning low, and no one to blow it out with him. He thought often of love, but he never spoke about it. He believed silence was safer. Yet, silence also kept his heart aching. This ache grew each year, and now it was too heavy to hide. And far away, someone else had been holding her own silence, Sandra Bullock. She had shared the screen with him many years ago. She had laughed with him on sets. She had seen his kindness when cameras were not rolling. She remembered the way he would let her shine, never competing, always supporting. She remembered how he carried himself with humility, even when the world called him a star. Those memories stayed alive in her heart long after their work was done, but she had never told him what those moments truly meant to her. She never confessed that her heart had held his image in a quiet, sacred corner all these years. The hook of this story begins with a question many people ask themselves at night. What if love has been beside me all along, but fear kept me from speaking? This was the very question Sandra carried. She had lived her own life, faced her own storms, and built her own strength. But there was one truth she could not erase. Every time she thought of true kindness, she thought of Keanu. Every time she thought of a partner who could respect her soul, she thought of him. Yet, she had stayed quiet. The world thought they were only friends, but her heart knew otherwise. Keanu was not blind to her kindness either. He remembered her warmth, her laughter, the way she always treated people on set with respect no matter their role. He saw how she carried herself with grace when others would break under pressure. But he, too, carried silence. Maybe it was fear of losing a friend. Maybe it was fear of being misunderstood. Maybe it was the belief that timing had already passed them by. So he never spoke, and she never spoke, and years rolled on. But fate has a way of testing silence. One evening, Keanu attended a small gathering in Los Angeles. It was not a red carpet event, not a stage filled with cameras. It was simple, almost quiet. He liked it that way. The room was filled with gentle music, people talking softly and no spotlight on him. He was standing near the window looking out at the city lights when he heard a familiar voice behind him. It was Sandra. Her smile was the same, but her eyes carried more stories now, stories of struggle and growth. He turned, and for a moment, it felt like years had melted away. They spoke like old friends, catching up, laughing at small memories, but beneath each word there was something unsaid. Keanu noticed her glances, the way her smile lingered longer than usual. Sandra noticed his pauses, as if he wanted to say more but stopped himself. The night went on, but their hearts carried. An invisible storm. Every second of silence between them was louder than the music around them. Something had to break, but who would break it? As the gathering ended, Keanu offered to walk her to her car. The night was cool, the streets quiet, and the sound of their footsteps echoed softly. Sandra hesitated, then asked, "Keanu, do you ever feel like something important has been waiting for too long?" His heart tightened. He looked at her, trying to read her eyes. There was fear there, but also courage trying to rise. He wanted to ask her what she meant, but before he could, she looked down and smiled as if hiding her own truth. The moment slipped away, but the question burned inside him. He returned home that night and sat in silence again. But this time the silence was different. It was filled with her voice, her question, and the heavy thought that maybe, just maybe, the love he had been waiting for was closer than he ever believed. He felt hope, but he also felt fear. What if he spoke and lost her? What if he stayed silent and lost her anyway? Sandra, too, returned home with her heart trembling. She replayed every second of that walk. She knew what she wanted to say, but the words had died in her throat. She had carried her feelings for so long that confessing them now felt impossible. Yet she also knew time does not wait forever. Her heart whispered that if she stayed quiet again, she would regret it for the rest of her life. She did not want to carry silence anymore, but could she truly tell him? This was the storm both of them faced. Two hearts filled with love, trapped by silence. Two souls searching for courage, wondering if fate was giving them one last chance. The story of Keanu and Sandra was no longer about fame, no longer about movies, no longer about the past. It was about now. It was about whether two people could finally break the chains of fear and speak from the heart before it was too late. And so the first chapter of this journey closed with a question left hanging in the air. A question that would decide everything. Would Sandra finally confess the truth that had lived in her heart for years? Would Keanu finally open the door he had kept locked for so long? Or would silence win again? The courage to speak. The night. After the gathering, Keanu sat by his window staring at the city lights. The world outside was glowing with life, but inside his home there was only silence. Silence had been his companion for years, but now it felt heavy. Her words replayed in his mind. Do you ever feel like something important has been waiting for too long? He could not escape them. They struck his heart again and again. Was she speaking about her life? Or was she speaking about them? He wanted to know, but fear kept his lips sealed. Keanu had faced storms on movie sets, had stood in front of explosions and battles in front of cameras. But the battle inside him now was far harder. How do you fight silence? How do you speak when one word could change everything? He poured himself tea, but even the steam rising from the cup seemed to whisper Sandra's name. At the same time, Sandra sat in her living room holding an old photograph from the set of their first film together. She remembered the day clearly. He had brought coffee not only for her, but for every single crew member. It was a small act, but it revealed who he truly was. Respect was not something he gave only to stars. He gave it to everyone. That moment had planted something in her heart, a seed that never stopped growing. And yet years had passed, and she had never let that seed blossom into words. The hook of this part begins with a truth many people fear to admit. Sometimes the hardest words are the simplest ones. I love you. Days passed, but both of them felt restless. Sandra went to interviews and smiled for cameras, but her heart was elsewhere. Keanu walked through crowds, but his mind was locked in that one walk to the car. That one question she asked. Something was pulling them closer, stronger than before. A week later, fate intervened. Sandra was invited to a charity event for children in need. When she arrived, she saw Keanu across the room. He was not surrounded by cameras or chasing attention. He was sitting with a small group of children, listening to their stories, tying shoelaces for one of them, laughing gently at their jokes. She stood quietly and watched. This was the man she had always known, the man who carried fame like it. Was nothing, the man whose humility was deeper than his success. But then something unexpected happened. One child handed Keanu a drawing. It was a picture of a family holding hands. The child said softly, "This is you, Mr. Keanu. I think you should not be alone." The room fell silent. Even Sandra froze. Keanu looked at the drawing for a long time, his eyes soft, almost breaking. He smiled, hugged the child, but his silence said everything. He wanted a family. He wanted love. That moment broke something inside Sandra. It was no longer a question of timing or fear. She realized that his longing was the same as hers. They were two hearts carrying the same silence, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to end it. After the event, she walked up to him. He turned, surprised, but his smile was gentle. "Sandra," he said softly, as if her name was a comfort. They talked for a while, but both felt the weight of something unsaid. The crowd slowly thinned, and they were left near the exit. Sandra's hands trembled. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. Here comes another hook. Sometimes the scariest moment in life is not standing in front of a crowd, but standing in front of the one person who can break your heart. Sandra took a deep breath and whispered, "Keanu, there's something I should have told you long ago." He looked at her, his eyes calm but curious. The world seemed to slow down. Every sound in the room faded, leaving only her heartbeat. She opened her mouth, but once again, fear pulled her back. She shook her head, smiled weakly, and said instead, "Thank you for always being so kind." Keanu's eyes softened. He could sense there was more behind her words. He wanted to ask, but he respected silence, just as he always did. They walked outside, and he offered her his jacket as the night. Air grew cold. The gesture was simple, but her heart trembled. When she drove away, tears filled her eyes. She hated her silence. She hated that fear won again. She promised herself this would be the last time she let fear control her. Later that night, she wrote a letter. Her hands shook as she wrote each word, but she let her heart speak. She wrote about the kindness she saw in him, the respect he gave to everyone, the moments that stayed in her heart long after the cameras stopped rolling. And then, for the first time, she wrote the words she had never spoken. "I love you." She sealed the letter, but did not send it. Not yet. She needed courage to put it in his hands. Meanwhile, Keanu sat at home with the child's drawing on his desk. He kept staring at it. It was not just a child's sketch. It was a mirror of his soul. He knew what he wanted. He wanted a partner. He wanted love that was built on respect, not fame. And in his heart, one name echoed again and again: Sandra. The storm inside both of them was now impossible to ignore. Fate had placed them together twice. Fate had whispered truths through children and through silences. But fate can only open doors. It was up to them to step through. The suspense grew. Would Sandra find the courage to give him the letter? Would Keanu find the courage to speak before it was too late? This was no longer just a story of two stars. It was a story of two human beings standing at the edge of truth, with only one step separating them from love or from another lifetime of regret. The letter that could change everything. Andra kept the letter on her desk for days. Every morning she would glance at it. Every night she would move it slightly closer to her bag. But still it stayed sealed. Inside those folded pages was her heart, her truth, her secret that had waited for years. She wanted to hand it to him, but fear was louder. What if he did not feel the same? What if her confession broke the bond they already had? Yet, the more she avoided it, the heavier her chest felt. Silence was no longer safe. Silence was now a weight she could no longer carry. Hook. Sometimes the heaviest object in the world is not a stone or a mountain, but a piece of paper carrying the words we are too afraid to speak. While she struggled with her silence, Keanu was fighting his own battle. The child's drawing was still on his table. He kept it near him like a mirror of his longing. He thought of Sandra more than ever. Now, her laughter from the gathering, her trembling words after the charity event, her question that night. Do you ever feel like something important has been waiting too long? He felt the truth rising inside him. Maybe she had been waiting too. But Keanu had always lived with humility. He never wanted to assume. He respected her too much to misread her silence. Still, his heart whispered that it was time to act. A week later, fate brought another chance. Sandra was invited to a private dinner hosted by a mutual friend. She almost refused. She feared facing him without courage. But something inside told her she could not run forever. She placed the letter carefully in her bag before leaving. When she arrived, the room was filled with warm lights and soft music. It was not crowded, only a handful of familiar faces. But when she saw him sitting at the far end of the table, her heart skipped. Keanu looked up, and his eyes softened instantly. The world shrank again. The dinner went on with laughter and conversation, but both of them were trapped in their own storm. Sandra touched her bag again and again, feeling the letter inside. Her palms grew damp. She wanted to hand it to him when no one was watching. She wanted the truth to finally breathe. But then an unexpected twist came. One of their old co-stars, sitting across the table, suddenly asked a question with a playful smile. "Keanu, you never married. Why is that? Are you still searching for the right woman?" The table grew quiet. Eyes turned toward him. Keanu smiled politely, but inside, his chest tightened. He could laugh it off. He could give a safe answer, but his eyes betrayed him. They flickered toward Sandra for the briefest moment. And, in that moment, her breath caught. Keanu spoke slowly. "I believe love is not something you chase. It is something that finds you when it is meant to. I am waiting for that truth." His words struck Sandra like thunder. He had not confessed, yet he had revealed everything. The table moved on with laughter, but for her, the world was no longer the same. She reached into her bag, her fingers, brushing the letter. She wanted to give it right then, but courage failed again. Later, when the dinner ended and people began leaving, she found herself walking beside him. The air outside was cool, and the streetlights cast a gentle glow. He walked in silence, but his presence felt like a question pressing against her soul. She stopped. Her bag trembled in her hand. She opened it and pulled out the letter. Her breath shook as she held it out to him. "Keanu," she whispered, "this is something I should have given you years ago. Hook. Sometimes a single moment can carry the weight of an entire lifetime." Keanu looked at the letter, then at her face. Her eyes were wet but strong. His hand reached out slowly, gently, as if he was touching something sacred. He took the letter, but he did not open it yet. Instead, he asked softly, "Are you sure you want me to read this?" Her voice broke, but she nodded. "Yes." He slipped the letter into his jacket pocket. "Then I will read it when I am alone," he said. His tone was not distant. It was warm, almost reverent. They stood in silence for a moment, the city breathing quietly around them. Then he whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." Sandra drove home with tears streaming down her face. The silence was broken now. The truth was out of her hands and in his. The fear of rejection still haunted her, but she also felt a strange peace. She had done what her heart begged her to do. That night, Keanu sat in his dimly lit room. He held the letter for a long time, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might hold. His fingers trembled as he finally tore it open. He read slowly, carefully, each word sinking deep into him. As he reached the end, his hands covered his face. His chest tightened with emotions too strong to hold back. He had waited years for love, and here it was, written in the simplest words, from the person he had never stopped thinking about. Hook. Love does not always arrive with a grand announcement. Sometimes it arrives folded quietly in a letter. Keanu placed the letter against his heart and whispered into the silence, "Sandra." The night felt alive, as if the universe had shifted. Their story was no longer about silence. It was now about what would come next. The answer hidden in silence. Keanu did not sleep that night. The letter lay on his table, unfolded, its words glowing in his heart like fire. Every line Sandra had written carried pieces of her soul. The laughter she remembered, the respect she admired, the kindness she had seen in him, and finally, the words that had waited for years. "I love you." He read them again and again until dawn broke. The sun rose quietly over Los Angeles, but inside his home, his heart was no longer quiet. It was trembling, alive, filled with something he had been missing for years. But along with joy came fear. What if she had given him this truth only to set herself free, not expecting an answer? What if his reply broke the delicate bond between them? Hook. Sometimes the hardest step is not confessing love, but answering it with equal courage. That morning, Sandra woke up with her heart pounding. She regretted nothing, yet fear lived in her chest like a storm. She imagined him opening the letter, reading her words. She imagined his silence. Every second of waiting felt like an eternity. She wanted to hear from him, but the phone stayed quiet. She kept checking, hour after hour, but no message came. In her mind, silence grew heavy again. She thought maybe she had misread him all these years. Maybe he cared, but not in the same way. The thought crushed her. Yet deep inside, hope refused to die. Keanu, meanwhile, was pacing his room. He had never been good with words. His strength was action, quiet gestures, respect shown through presence, not speeches. But this was different. This required words because silence would hurt her more than rejection. He finally sat at his desk and began to write his own letter. His handwriting was slow, almost hesitant. He wrote about how her kindness had always stayed with him, how her laughter had been like light in dark places, how he admired her strength and resilience. And then, with trembling hands, he wrote what he had held for too long. "I love you too." "I always have." He folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it inside his jacket pocket. But delivering it was another battle. Days passed. Sandra tried to stay busy with work, but her heart was restless. She went to interviews, smiled at cameras, answered questions about films, but inside she was asking only one question. Why had he not replied? Then one evening, fate gave them another crossing. A film studio had invited both of them to a private screening of an upcoming project. Neither of them knew the other would be there. Sandra entered the small theater first, her heart heavy. When she saw Keanu sitting quietly in the second row, her breath froze. He looked up and saw her too. Their eyes met, and silence filled the room even before the film began. Hook. Sometimes the loudest sound in the world is the silence between two people who hold the same secret. The screening played, but neither of them truly watched. Their minds were locked on each other. Sandra's fingers clenched her dress, her chest rising and falling with nerves. Keanu's hand kept brushing against his jacket pocket where his letter rested. When the lights came on after the screening, people chatted about the film, but Keanu's eyes searched only for her. He stood, walked slowly toward her, and for a moment it felt like the entire theater had disappeared. "Sandra," he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with questions. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded envelope, and handed it to her. "This is my answer." Her hands shook as she took it. She wanted to open it right there, but the room was still full of people. He leaned closer and whispered, "Read it when you are alone. But know this. Silence will not stand between us anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She pressed the envelope to her chest as if it was life itself. That night she returned home and tore it open with trembling fingers. Her eyes moved over each word slowly, her lips parting as she read his truth. When she reached the end, when she read, "I love you too. I always have," she broke into sobs. Tears ran freely, but they were tears of release, of joy, of years of silence finally ending. Hook. Love is not always born in grand gestures. Sometimes it is written quietly on paper, carried in pockets, waiting for the right moment to be freed. Sandra held the letter against her heart and whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you." But though the truth was now open between them, another question rose. What would come next? Would they find the courage to speak these words face to face? Or would fear try one last time to silence them? For both Keanu and Sandra, the next meeting would no longer be about letters. It would be about voices, about speaking the truth out loud, about stepping beyond years of waiting. The suspense now was no longer about confession. It was about courage. When silence breaks into voices, Andra could not sleep that night after reading his letter. Every word was etched into her soul. Every sentence wrapped her in warmth she had been missing for years. Yet alongside her joy lived fear. She thought, what if the letters are enough for him? What if he never speaks the words aloud? What if this truth stays hidden in paper, but never blooms in reality? Hook. Written words can heal, but spoken words have the power to change a life forever. The next morning, she sat by her window with coffee, staring at the rising sun. She whispered to herself, "I have to hear it. I have to see it in his eyes. I cannot live with only letters. I need his voice." Across the city, Keanu also sat awake. He had given her his truth, but now he wondered if she truly believed it. He thought, she deserves more than paper. She deserves to hear it from me, face to face, with no fear left between us. The universe seemed to listen to their hearts, because soon another chance arrived. Their mutual friend, the same one who had hosted the dinner, invited both of them to a small charity gala. This time, Keanu knew she would be there, and Sandra knew he would be there too. Both felt their hearts racing even before the evening came. When Sandra entered the hall, her eyes immediately searched for him. She saw him standing near a corner, dressed simply, his hands folded in front of him. He was not surrounded by cameras or fans, just as humble and quiet as always. When their eyes met, she felt a shiver. It was as if the entire hall vanished, leaving only the two of them. Keanu walked toward her, each step slow, deliberate. Her heart beat faster with every movement. When he stood in front of her, silence settled between them again. But this time it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence right before thunder. Hook. Silence becomes powerful when it carries the weight of words about to be spoken. Sandra, he said softly, his voice steady but his eyes trembling with truth. I read your letter. Every word. It felt like you had opened a door I have been staring at for years. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Tears already burned in her eyes. He took a breath, his voice low but clear. I do not want silence anymore. I love you. I always have. Those words fell like rain on a desert. She broke into tears, her hand covering her mouth, her body trembling. She had waited so many years to hear this, and now it was real, spoken. Alive, she whispered back through her tears. I love you too. I always have. The moment was so raw, so honest, that even those nearby paused. Though no one heard their exact words, they saw the way they looked at each other, the way her tears turned into a smile, the way his calm face softened with relief. Hook. Love does not need an audience, yet when it finally blooms, the world feels its light. After the gala, they walked outside together. The night air was cool, the sky filled with faint stars. They walked in silence, but this time it was the silence of peace, not fear. Keanu stopped near a quiet street light and turned to her. Do you know why I never married? He asked softly. She looked at him, waiting. Because, he continued, I never found anyone who felt like home. Until now. Until you. Her tears returned, but this time they were gentle. She whispered, and I never spoke because I was afraid to lose you. But I realize now, losing you to silence would have been worse. They stood under the light, their words flowing like water breaking through a dam. Years of silence were now turning into spoken truth. But even as joy filled them, another thought pressed into Sandra's heart. Love was not just about confession. Love needed courage every day, in every choice, in every step forward. She feared what the world would say if they were together. They were both public figures, always watched, always judged. Would their love survive the pressure of cameras, of gossip, of questions? Hook. Confessing love is one battle. Protecting it against the world is another. Keanu, sensing her silence, placed his hand gently over hers. I know what you are thinking. The world will talk, it always does. But we do not live for the world. We live for truth. And the truth is that I love you. His words sank deep. Her fear did not vanish, but it softened. His strength gave her strength. They walked on, their hands brushing until finally, his fingers intertwined with hers. It was simple, yet it felt like the bravest act they had ever done. For the first time, Sandra felt light, as if years of carrying hidden feelings had finally ended. Yet in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. Love had been spoken, but the journey ahead would test them in ways they could not imagine. Because when two hearts unite, life always asks one more question. How far will you go to protect what you love? Love's final test. After the night of their confession, Keanu and Sandra felt like new souls. The silence that had trapped them for years was finally broken. Yet, as days passed, reality began to knock on their door. The world had eyes everywhere. Soon, whispers began in the media. Photos of them together at the gala, small reports of their closeness, speculation about whether they were more than friends. Sandra scrolled through her phone one morning and saw headlines flashing. Are Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock finally more than co-stars? She felt fear rising. She knew how cruel the world could be. People would twist their story, invent lies, paint their love as a performance. She did not want their truth to be turned into gossip. Hook. Sometimes love's biggest challenge is not what lives inside two hearts, but what waits outside them. She called Keanu, her voice trembling. What if they ruin this? What if they break what we have before it even begins? His voice on the other end was calm, steady, like an anchor. They cannot break what is real, Sandra. Love is not theirs to touch. It is ours to protect. Still, her heart was restless. For years she had lived carefully, protecting her privacy, keeping her struggles hidden. Now, stepping into the light with him felt both beautiful and terrifying. A few days later, they met at a quiet beach far from crowds. The waves crashed softly. The sun cast golden light across the sand. They walked barefoot, hand in hand, letting the ocean air carry their thoughts. Keanu stopped, turned to her and said, I want you to know something. Love is not just about big moments, not just about letters and confessions. It is about staying when things get hard. It is about patience when the world misunderstands. I am ready for that, if you are. Her eyes filled with tears. I am afraid, she admitted. But I am more afraid of living without you. Hook. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing love even when fear still whispers. They sat on the sand, the waves touching their feet. Keanu pulled something from his pocket. A small silver ring, simple, humble, nothing flashy. He held it in his palm and looked at her. This is not about grand proposals or public moments. This is about truth. Will you walk with me, not as co-stars, not as friends trapped in silence, but as partners? Will you be the one I come home to? Her hands covered her mouth, her tears falling freely now. She nodded, whispering, "Yes, Keanu. Yes, I will." They embraced as the ocean roared behind them, as if the earth itself was celebrating. In that moment, years of waiting, years of silence, years of hidden love finally became something whole, something alive. But their story did not end with that embrace. Life still tested them. Cameras followed, questions came, interviews tried to pry into their private hearts. Yet they faced it all with quiet strength. Keanu remained calm, never answering with anger, always with humility. Sandra stood by his side, her smile steady, her heart finally free. Together they discovered that love was not fragile after all. It was resilient. It was a shield. It was a truth too strong for gossip, too deep for rumor. Hook. True love is not proven in silence, or in words alone. It is proven in the storms it survives. Months later, they returned to that same beach, walking barefoot again. This time, they did not speak of fear or silence. They spoke of dreams, of building a life together, of giving kindness to the world, not as two lonely souls, but as one united force. As the sun set, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Sandra leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for waiting for me." He kissed her forehead gently and replied, "Thank you for speaking from your heart." The waves rolled on, the sky darkened into stars, and their story, once trapped in silence, now breathed in every heartbeat they shared, because in the end, love had won.